Hi, everybody. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about egomaniacs and Adam's ribs. Is Russell Holmes's twin? I wanted to start out by looking at some definitions of what an egomaniac or egomania is. What do I mean by that? Let's look at these three. These are all culled from dictionary.com. They come from the American Heritage Dictionary and a couple of other sources. If you go to dictionary.com, you can find the references. An obsessive preoccupation with the self, an intense and irresistible love for yourself and concern for your own needs, and an extreme appreciation or preoccupation with the self. Now, on one level, we could easily argue that really Russell and Holmes and Patricia Donleavy aren't exactly egomaniacs. Well, Donleavy aren't exactly egomaniacs, but I'd like to suggest that they are to a very important extent, and it's what makes them, each three of those characters, possible. I wanted to just sort of go revisit the opening section in the book where Russell literally stumbles across Holmes. As it was, my first awareness that there was another soul in the universe was when a male throat cleared itself loudly, not 4 feet from me. The Latin text flew into the air, followed closely by an Anglo-Saxon oath. Heart-pounding, I hastily pulled together what dignity I could and glared down through my spectacles at this figure hunched up at my feet, a gaunt, graying man in his 50s, wearing a cloth cap, ancient tweed greatcoat, and decent shoes, with a threadbare army rucksack on the ground beside him. A tramp, perhaps, or who had left the rest of his possessions stashed beneath a bush, or an eccentric, certainly no shepherd. He said nothing, very sarcastically. I snatched up my book and brushed it off. "What on earth are you doing?" I demanded. "Lying in wait for someone?" He raised an eyebrow at that, smiled in a singularly condescending and irritating manner, and opened his mouth to speak in that precise drawl which is the trademark of the overly educated upper-class English gentleman. A high voice, a biting one, definitely an eccentric. "I should think that I can hardly be accused of lying anywhere," he said, "as I am seated openly on an uncluttered hillside, minding my own business, when, that is, I am not having to fend off those who propose to crush me underfoot." He rolled the penultimate R to put me in my place. And this is, I would like to advance, this is an encounter of two egomaniacs. These are two people who are completely absorbed in their own worlds, their own concerns, and their own interests. They really have no time for other people in terms of personal relationships. For both Holmes and Russell, their primary interaction with other human beings is observing them. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to this rule. In both cases, Holmes has Watson and he has Mrs. Hudson and some other people. But primarily, both Holmes and Russell view other people as subjects of observation. Russell is very, very specific about, she perceives a lot about Holmes just by looking at him, and she's already engaged in the deduction. But the point is that, to some extent, a detective has to be an egomaniac, because they have to live within themselves and look out at the world and observe it. Basically, they see themselves as an arbiter or a judge. So, there's an aspect to which, there's a level upon which any detective must be at the center of their own universe. If they don't do this, then they become engaged in things like people's emotions and their feelings and their history, and they don't have that distance from the story to be able to piece together what they need to learn. So there are good and bad things about egomania. The negatives are things that we see in both Russell and Holmes. I didn't mention it here, but I'll put it in here, is that egomaniacs tend to be extremely judgmental. They tend to be very selfish because, of course, they are at the center of their universe. If we look back at the definitions, it talks about an intense or irresistible love for yourself and concern for your own needs. Since the needs of Russell, Holmes, and Donleavy are to unravel whatever they're working on, to understand, to comprehend, to learn, and in the case of Donleavy, to figure out revenge as well. This is their primary concern. Everything else takes a back seat to that. Now, for Donleavy, it's questionable whether she has a love for herself. We know from both Conan Doyle's version of Holmes and King's version of Holmes that he does think rather highly of himself at times. I mean, he's kind of proud when he solves a mystery, and the same is true of Russell. They think well of themselves when they do well, and they see themselves as different and better than others. In Russell's case, this doesn't mean that she doesn't respect or like other people, because she does, and she's capable of forming connections. But she does see herself as being, to some extent, apart from others, certainly in terms of her intellectual interests and the ability of her mind to resolve things. She kind of tolerates other people and likes them as she finds them sometimes, but she recognizes that their minds are not like hers. So let's go back to the negatives here. We have judgmental. The negatives of egomania is egomaniacs tend to be judgmental. They tend to be selfish. They tend towards obsession. We certainly see this with Donleavy, but we also see this with Holmes and with Russell, that there's one part of being a detective, of being an unraveler of mysteries, that involves obsession. You have to be so focused that all other things get shut out. If you are somebody who's read a lot of detective fiction, you'll often find that detectives don't have very good personal lives, in part because they don't lavish the kind of attention, love, and passion on their regular relationships that they do on the resolution of a mystery. Okay, and finally, egomaniacs tend to wreak emotional and physical damage on the people who are around them. They tend to hurt people because they don't care as much about them as they do about others, or I'm sorry, about themselves. Or other people just aren't even in the equation, because there's either an expectation that a person will be like them. We often see this in the case of Holmes. Holmes takes very poor care of himself in general. He's like, well, whatever, and he expects that other people will be able to bear with the same things, and it doesn't even occur to him many times that it should matter to him. And so that leads to some physical damage as well, and people get put in harm's way, or they have all kinds of things that happen to them, or they may be killed. In the case of Donleavy, her egomania leads her to see people as disposable. We can just get rid of them. They're going to be inconvenient, or there's going to be a problem. So you gotta go. Sucks to be you. Okay. Now, those are the negatives, and the negatives of egomania are pretty obvious. But on the other side, there are positives as well, and it's this focus that I've talked about. The ability to focus and to concentrate for long periods of time is an admirable thing. It's something that we look at our detectives and we see that this is one of the ways in which they are different. It allows for the weaving together of clues over a long period of time, and it allows for all sorts of achievements and abilities that that might not normally be possible for an average person. The other thing, and it's the flip side of the coin, is that there's selflessness. We have the selfishness of egomania. I mean, that's part and parcel with what it is. But we also have selflessness. In other words, because of this ability to focus, and because of, in the case of Russell and Holmes, an interest in justice. This is one of their things. They are focused, or they have this connection to the idea that there should be justice, that mysteries can be resolved. For this, they give up their physical comfort, their convenience, they put their lives at risk. They do all these things, and it's the fascinating other side. If we look back at the detectives that we've seen, in many cases we see that in the interests of solving a case, they put themselves at risk. So there's that selflessness, which is important. There's also immersion. There's the ability to become totally surrounded by the issues at hand, to be able to shut out things that don't matter, and exist in an environment where attainment of clarity and of knowledge are possible. Scholars tend to be egomaniacs to some extent because their topic becomes so important to them that they think it's important to everyone. It's part of why people teach. I mean, you wouldn't have the ability to talk to other people about the things that you read and to feel like, I really have to tell you about these books. I really want you to know these things. I wouldn't be doing that if I wasn't egomaniacal enough to believe that the thing that I hold important should be important to you too, on some level, or it will be if we work together and I explain it to you. Okay, and that's that thing about you. The other positive of egomania is that it tends to lead to expertise. And so I think it's important to look at this and to recognize that one of the things that binds Holmes and Russell together, oddly enough, is that they are both egomaniacs, and that in each other they meet somebody who allows them to transcend their egomania. Because they're so similar, they're almost as one, and it allows them to come together in a way that probably wouldn't be possible for them with any other person. They understand each other. They understand this idea of connection and or they understand this idea of focus, of hyper focus, and the obsession with whatever they're doing, and of the neglect of the self, and of throwing themselves into work. For both Holmes and Russell, they are seriously preoccupied with the idea of learning, and it makes sense. They don't have the feelings aren't hurt that the one person isn't paying attention to the other, because they understand that preoccupation. So I've been talking a lot about the doppelganger, or the double, the idea that in many stories and in detective stories, you can look for a double. Who's the reflection, the opposite of your main character? What do they tell us about each other? And the question that I posed is, at the beginning of this lecture, is Russell Holmes's twin? Is she his double? Or is she his Adam's rib? Because if you may recall the story from the Bible, woman is supposedly created from man. God takes a rib out of Adam and he makes a woman. Is she a part of him? Is she his creation? Or is she his twin? Or is she his double? I'd like to suggest that if she's anything, she is his. She's his twin, because although he assists her in becoming the detective that she has the potential to be, throughout their relationship, she asserts herself as an independent partner. Now, she needs the knowledge that he has, and she talks at one point in the book about how when Holmes says, well done, Russell, that's very meaningful to her. He is her mentor. There's no question about it. But his ability to mentor her grows out of the fact that they are equal and similar. she's not his creation. She couldn't have learned from him unless she already had the potential to be his equal. She's not his double. I mean, this sounds silly, but she's not his doppelganger, his ghostly counterpart, his light, his dark to his light, because they are so similar, and because they are so alike. One place where we see this that's very interesting is that they both do a lot of changing of identities. Holmes can dress as a man, Holmes can dress as a woman, and Russell can dress as a man or a boy, and they both have this ability that identity, the idea of identity itself, is very fluid with them. They don't just change appearance or sex. They change class. They change race. Think about Russell's ongoing masquerade as a male Indian, meaning from the Indian subcontinent, a male Indian undergraduate. Think about Holmes's impersonation of Rome, a gypsy, during one of the earlier, during the mystery of when the senator's daughter is kidnapped. So they're not just able to weave in and out of different classes, races, sex. They can change sex. They can change age, height, weight, width, everything. There are so many ways in which they have this fluidity of identity, which oddly enough leads to union. This ability to, for lack of a better term, I would call it shape-shifting. This ability to inhabit other people is this strange way in which, this strange form that for both of them, their egomania affects them, for lack of a better term. Because they're both interested in the act of transformation. You can tell that Holmes and Russell really enjoy this activity. And it's interesting when Russell goes on her shopping spree and gets all of her beautiful clothes, which are then destroyed. This is another act of impersonation. It's another way in which she becomes another person. And they both enjoy this. It's of interest to them. They're proud of their ability to do this and to carry it off. And this is something that, strangely enough, brings them together. Okay, so all of what I've been talking about twins and doubles and what it means to be an egomaniac. But I do want to make sure that I talk about how they are different. What we see now, she's a girl and he's a boy. Okay, that's fine. We got that out of the way. But they're different in some other ways. First of all, Holmes is distinctly a-religious. He is, he's irreligious. He has no time for religion. It's completely, with Russell, it's completely different. For Russell, spirituality and religious philosophy are extremely important, and they are extensions of her own intellectual rigor. Remember that her other area of expertise and interest is mathematics. And she sees these things as completely related, as that they are logical exercises and that one can get to the spiritual from the logical. Holmes doesn't feel that way. And, one way of looking at this, of reading this, is to say that this is one way King kind of sneaks through the back door and gives Russell some femininity. Because this ability to get at belief, get to the place of belief, is something that is often connected to women, as opposed to men who are rooted in logic. That we see that even with Russell, while she has this incredibly powerful intellect, she also has an emotional side. It's one she's able to suppress many times, but it's also one that she's constantly engaging with. Much of the descriptions of what's going on with Russell involve her emotional life, the things that she has repressed about the death of her family, and the death of her brother, and also the things that she has, that she's constantly she's engaging with. And it's this difference between the two of them that ultimately affects Holmes. She brings him to a world of emotion. He comes to care for her. Now, he cares for her in his own way. If you read the second book, you'll see, their proposal, when he proposes marriage to her, it's very funny because it's not, oh, my darling Russell, how I love you. And yet, towards the end, in the last third of Beekeeper's Apprentice, we really see him succumbing to emotion, being tender with her, being kind to her in ways that are the treatment of an equal. And that he comes to a life of romantic attraction to her through her own vulnerabilities. I think that it's because they are different in that way that he's able to be changed. All right. So the last thing that I haven't talked about is at great length is Donleavy and how she fits into the equation. I am going to stay with the part that, or with something that I stated when I was talking about Donleavy in a previous announcement, that she is Russell's doppelganger, even more than she is Holmes's. And yet, for both of them, one of the most crucial things that Donleavy reflects is the power of single-mindedness, the power of egomania, because she develops her case, she unravels her case over the course of years, and she takes her time, but there is this element of excitement, almost sensuality in the slow unfolding of her plot around Holmes, and it only goes into high gear because she's terminally ill, and so it has to happen. But if we look at that sensuality, that obsession, that passion with unfolding the case, we then look back at Russell and Holmes, and we see another way in which they are very importantly twins, and that their ability to focus on whatever it takes and however long it takes is something that unites them and makes them both different from us and fascinating to us. All right, thank you.